Today I'm bringing back one of the most charismatic guests I've had on this show, Mr. Yogi Aaron. Aaron has been on the show in the past to talk about his ideas to move away from stretching and more muscle activation. So we're talking about that, continuation of that conversation. But one of the focus for Yogi Aaron this year is to remove pain from the body. So we'll talk about how his AYAMA practice and muscle activation work into the ideas for removing pain. Also talking about functional biomechanics and how your biomechanics might be different than my biomechanics because it's based off of how we live our lives and the functionality of the lives that we live. Aaron approaches the human being as the human being, not with the set of principles that's already predetermined that he's just going to lay on every single human being that he involves himself with. He looks at the human, sees how he can help, makes his approach, and it's beautiful to witness and beautiful to hear him talk about. So I hope you get something out of this conversation today. We'll see you on the other side. But first, this message. No matter how much we prepare, the holidays tend to stress us out. So this year, take a moment to reset and recenter with a grounding retreat in Costa Rica. Join Jeff Hawkins, Steve Wimmer, Cameron Nagashima, and myself, Adam Reel, for a 1-week immersive yoga retreat at Blue Osa Resort, backed up to miles of pristine beach. Every day you'll have an option to experience yoga, meditation, relaxation, self-discovery, adventures, or your own personal free time. This is a time to build your peaceful practices before you need them. Take this time for yourself. Visit GarudaWellness.com for details. We have pricing options available, and if you pay in full by July 1st, you receive a 20% discount. Through the experiences offered, there's a lot of different ways to build your practice and approach this retreat. Take time to create space for yourself so you can hold space for others. Reset and recenter. Visit GarudaWellness.com for more information. That's Garuda, Garuda, Wellness, WELLNESS.com. GarudaWellness.com. And now an uninterrupted episode with Yogi Aaron. All right, welcome back to our show. Today I'm being joined by a dear friend of the show, Mr. Yogi Aaron. Aaron's been on the show numerous times. I actually just did an Instagram live with Yogi Aaron a couple weeks ago, which is fantastic. We talked about, busting the myths of yoga, which is awesome. There's so many out there. And one of the things that I love about Aaron's approach to what he does is that he approaches it differently. So he approaches yoga differently. The generic idea of yoga you hear if you just ask the layman on the street is like yoga's stretching, right? And one of the approaches that Aaron has is the yamas, which is kind of muscle activation, where it counters stretching quite a bit. And so the past episode that we talked about and stuff that we've chatted about has been about stretching and about the antithesis of stretching. And so we're going to touch a little bit about on that today. But Aaron has just so much stuff that he works on throughout the year. He has these themes he goes throughout the year, and we talked about the demystifying yoga, things that the Instagram live that he does. But this new thing that he's working on too is removing pain for the year. And again, like if you heard the word that, the phrase stretching is bad, or you've heard Aaron talk, and you're triggered by that phrase or by that idea, listen. Because it's so important to listen to people that counter the ideas that you have and the information that you have. And not saying that if you listen to this, your mind will be changed, but you got to have that other information that comes in that counters the info that you've had for a long time, especially if it goes against the cultural, the standard, the body norms, anything like that. I love listening to that stuff. And again, you have the discernment to say, that lands with me, that doesn't. But you never know until you hear the information. And Aaron has such a vast well of information about what he does, the science to back what he's talking about, that, it's not a random person off the street. This is a person that knows exactly what he's talking about. So, so first off, Aaron, thanks for being here. I always love talking with you. You're one of the most jovial human beings I've met. And I just love your charisma and your energy.
Thank you. I wanted just to kind of pipe in and just say, to that idea that, you and I were talking before the show about this kind of place that we have to be in, or that we need to work on getting into, is asking the question, what don't I know? And I think that has always kind of driven me quite a bit But when I started getting into this kind of field and recognizing how stretching was harming me and how that led me to ending up in the hospital, if I look at the path, honestly, it was like I really clung to my, let's just say, beliefs for now,
Mhm.
or my erroneous perceptions. That's a word I love. Erroneous perceptions. I clung to whatever it was I was clinging to, and I had to, just like Saul on the way to Damascus, kind of like say, "What don't I know?" and have that, moment of being open to receiving information. Of course, it didn't happen like lightning speed like it did with Saul, who became Paul, but my process took a little longer.
Sometimes I wish it could just be like that. The snap the finger, please. Just give me the lesson. Give me the osmosis. Give me the
Yes.
abridged version. But we all know that the process is like you get your experience from the journey, right? It's not
Yeah.
like winning the blue prize, winning the gold medal, whatever it is. It's all the journey to get to that point, all the woes and all that bullshit. We got to go through because that's where we learn. Unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so on that journey to talking with people and unpacking all this, I think it's interesting because growing up in the yoga world now for the past decade, a little over a decade, what I find, and I'm victim of this too. By no means I'm not saying that this is a finger pointing at other people, but a lot of times like we just accept the information that's been given to us because it's been passed down, whether it's a lineage or a trusted person that you know. But very rarely do, like you said, do we ask the question as to why, or what am I not asking? What answer am I not even seeking? Right. And again, like stretching, we've been taught to stretch since we were children, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's been correct or incorrect is it's a whole other story. I work with a bunch of high school teams now, cross country, sports athletes and stuff like that, doing different types of yoga with them to activate muscles, to relief, all that good stuff. And the first time that I step in a new session with a group of kids, they are incorrectly stretching, quote unquote stretching. They are like, if you're in like a seated forward fold, they're literally grabbing onto their feet and pulling as hard as they can
Yeah.
because they think that they have to look a certain way to stretch. And that, I
Yeah.
think, a lot of that psychology, whether again stretching is bad or not, that the psychology of the way it's being approached is really screwed up. So these beautiful 200-hour teachers that come out and they're all anxious and ready to do and go to do the teaching and all that fun stuff. This is that opportunity now to really dive in and ask the questions about like, why do we do this? Why do I hold swan pose for 5 minutes on one side? Like, is that actually
Yes.
good for my body? Is that good for my tissues? Is that pain I'm feeling something I'm supposed to breathe through? Right. Or is
Yeah.
like, in your in your Instagram demystifying. I don't know if we got to this, but one of the myths that I heard as a student and finally had the opportunity to ask as a going through my teacher training was, I've always heard that in twists it's like wringing out a rag, like your
Yeah.
organs are wringing out toxins. Now that doesn't feasibly make sense to me that your organs can do that. Is that a real thing or not? And the teacher's like, that is definitely not a real thing. Your anatomy doesn't do that. And I'm like, well, what the fuck is everybody saying that shit for? I've heard that countless times from different teachers in different, places of the world, all kind of repeating this verbatim, this kind of verbiage. So it's just interesting that,
Yes.
when you start to approach things in a way that might be countering to the norm, some of the backlash that might come with that.
Absolutely. We just kind of like, I always say, and some people don't like this expression, it triggers some people, but it's kind of like the blind leading the blind, so often. And, as humans, and I don't think it's a yoga problem, I think it's a human problem. We're so dying to follow people. We're so dying to be on the in crowd or to, you know, finds a group of people or a tribe or whatever to reaffirm our sense of self. And so, in that vein, we just kind of like believe what we believe. But there was a word you used earlier. I think you used it. Unfortunately, you don't have a rewind on the live portion of this.
Nope.
Um, is that use the word practical, that
Hmm.
we need to be practical. And for me, the idea of yoga, and this probably was reinforced from my teacher, Swami Rama. If you ever read any of his writings, he's always asking people to learn to become practical. Like, ask yourself, is this practical? And does it make sense? And we don't do that often enough. And for me, that is actually the real yoga.
Right.
Uh, you know, Krishna said to Arjuna, sharpen your sword of discrimination, meaning, you know, make your mind work for you and sharpen its ability to. So in discrimination, this word in Sanskrit is vichara. Chara means knowledge and vi means to separate. So it literally means like the practice of separating knowledge within the chitta, within the field or the warehouse of your mind. This is yoga. You know, we hear so much about what yoga is, and it's nice, but but the real practice is learning to train your mind. I remember my teacher Rod one time, and ever since then I've been on this bandwagon, but he said, don't worry about samadhi. Actually, it was both Rod and Ellen. They both said it, but differently, that we're so consumed with feeling good that we never actually learn to train our mind on the process there. We want to go to a class, teacher turns up temperature to 120 degrees, plays Led Zeppelin, does a flowing kind of class where you barely have a moment to actually catch a full breath. And then you come out of it and you feel like, oh my God, that was so amazing. Well, yeah, you have so many endorphins moving through your body and stuff. Of course, you're going to feel good. But have you done anything to actually train your mind and help you to release yourself from your inner prison? So this is like where the work really is. And I keep coming back to this idea of like, you know, us in the yoga world, you were saying earlier, doing these, you know, long poses on one side, you know, do we actually ever ask the question, why are we really doing it? Yeah, I feel good, but what is this actually physiologically doing to me? And so just for people to know my position about feeling good, doing a line of cocaine feels good. Doesn't necessarily mean that you should do it. So
Right,
just because, but this is a huge epidemic in the yoga world that we're constantly being told, well, listen to your body, and if it feels good, do it. Well, I mean, listen to your body, that's a whole conversation.
Right, yeah.
But the feeling good part of it,
Yeah.
you know, doing Shalabhasana, just for your listeners to know what it is, like Superman pose. For I would say 99.9% of people does not feel good.
Yeah.
It is hard to do. And if you have a weak back, which 99.9% of people do, it's going to cause some discomfort. But it actually is fantastic. And it is virtually impossible to hurt yourself in that pose. And it does not feel good in the moment. I don't want to say hurts, but it is hard.
It's engaging. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
It is engaging. It's probably one of the hardest confrontational poses that is out there in terms of, you know, yoga postures, because it really gets us to confront ourselves. So, you know, give up on the idea of doing things that make you feel good. Do things that are going to help you to become a better version of yourself, help you to become stronger and, you know, pain-free.
Yeah.
For me, that is like the ultimate thing, to live life pain-free.
And that's, I think we've all gotten so used to living with modicums of pain that we don't even realize how much pain we're suffering through, you know. And then on top of that, you know, back to the intuition thing you just talked about, on top of that, you know, like say we do have chronic pain of sorts. Now we're conditioned to take Advil or acetaminophen, right? And that we've now shown has bastardized our whole nervous system, and it creates even more separation from the self, right? Because we're saying that knee pain self, you're bullshit, you're full of shit. There's no pain there. We're going to take this little white pill and it's going to feel great, right? So we just keep pushing ourselves like away from like, oh, we're going to listen to our body. body, trust your gut. But if that gut
Yeah.
hurts, take something to make it stop hurting because that's not supposed to happen. And it's
Yeah.
like we need to have this information, the openness for ourselves to learn new information and to be okay with changing things. To piggyback on what
Yes.
you said earlier, when I first started my yoga journey, I didn't know anything, right? I was going with my girlfriend at the time to just a studio down the street. I had no idea that practicing in a 120-degree room would make basically send my ass into fight or flight within 20 minutes, right? And me luckily making through those yoga practices was like grinning and bearing it. And half the time I would pass out 20 minutes before class or blackout, not remember it. I would finish the class, but then wake up out of my shavasana like, what the fuck just happened? And it wasn't until I took a class at a different studio that was about 100, 105 that I was like, oh my God, you can do an entire practice without dying? That's brand new to me. And I did that for years, like 2, 3 years before I finally realized that. But
Yeah.
that was one of those moments for me to change me because I thought that's just the way hot yoga was. That's the only thing I knew. All the teachers that I had identified with and the community that I identified with were all like, yeah, this is what we do. Found a different one, allowed for new information to come in, and there was an ego there at first. Oh, it's not hot enough. How am I going to practice in a not 120-degree room? What the fuck is that? And then the ego flare was there. But then after the class that I was able to finish all the way through without dying, I got up after my shavasana and actually felt like a human being. I was like, oh, but damned. Like, you can do this
Um,
differently, right? But there wasn't that pain. And it's like, there wasn't the suffering that was involved. There was still hard shit that we did to the point you made earlier. We need to know that we can do hard shit, right? We
yeah.
voluntarily put ourselves through this hour long, let's say a hot yoga class. We're going to get our butts kicked. We're going to have some emotions come up. We're going to move our bodies. We're going to do some things. But that's that reassurance that we can voluntarily do hard shit because life's going to be hard at times, right? We can put
Yeah.
ourselves through hard things and be okay with that, right? Because when hard things are going to come at us, we're not going to always be able to set aside time to deal with the hard shit. But if we've got a reservoir of built up hard shit that we've done to benefit us in some kind of way, it makes it a little more approachable, right?
Absolutely.
So I know that's a big round circle to get back to your removing pain for the year. But is removing pain for the year coupled with the Yama work that you've developed and the Yama training that you host, or is that kind of something that's ancillary or supporting it?
Yeah, I feel like, so I believe that we don't have to live in pain. And just to clarify for your listeners, I'm really talking about physical pain. Emotional pain, that's not my lane.
Yeah.
But in terms of physical pain, I have come to realize that we've misunderstood what pain is in the body. And so to a large degree, I I mean, to some degree, no, but to some degree, yes. And so you just said very eloquently earlier that our solution to pain is just pop a pill, or do something that makes you feel, good. But we don't have to live with pain. We need to understand that pain is telling us that there's something wrong. And it's usually something wrong that's in the muscular system, in the more specifically neuromuscular system. That group of muscles are not working properly. And so we can start to understand where the muscles aren't working because it shows up as muscle tightness,
Hmm.
and so muscle tightness is saying, hey, there's a problem here that needs to be addressed. And I'm kind of ad-libbing right now, but if you don't address it, then there's going to be a problem, and the problem will manifest as pain.
Right.
And so, for me, my big problem was tight hamstrings. That's actually what got me into yoga. But I just want to go on record and say 25 years went by. Not one yoga teacher ever came up to me and said to me, Aaron, your hamstrings tightness is the result of muscles not working in your body properly. The muscle tightness in your hamstrings is a protective mechanism that is trying to stabilize, an unstable system. And so I could feel at times that instability because I would get back pain.
Okay.
I started to develop back pain, and like a lot of yoga people, develop hip pain. Well, what was the solution to that muscle tightness and the pain? Stretch more. What did I actually need to do? I needed to, have somebody check underneath the hood
Mm-hmm.
and tell me that my hip flexors weren't working properly. So it was really the hamstring tightness was a response to my hip flexors not working.
Yeah.
And then of course, when I got hit by a boulder and broke my femur bone, and they cut right into my hip, through all of my glute
Mm-hmm.
and glute med muscles and hip flexors, TFL,
Damn.
all of that stuff got even more damaged. So pain is always the result of that. And there's this kind of like line in yoga, this thing in yoga that a lot of people say, and I've said it too, because I come from a very hard ass background, type A, no pain, no gain. That you repeat that to people, like no pain, no gain,
Right.
ride the edge, go to your edge. And well, actually, the pain is trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
We need to actually pay attention to it and not work through it. But actually, it's the check engine light of the body coming on saying, hey, there's an issue here. We need to understand what's going on. And so when I talk about like this idea of living pain free for this year, it's understanding, first of all, we have a choice. I think like that's understanding, like I have the, when I say I have a choice, that gives me the power to change, just to decide differently.
Yeah.
So I'm going to choose to live pain free. How do I do that? What don't I know? And what steps do I need to do to take to get there?
Yeah. Well, when you think it's just this is the way I am, there's like
Yeah.
subconsciously the choice is taken away. So you're like, well, I'm just going to Eeyore my way through this pain then, I guess, right? But it's like, no, 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 no. We
Yes.
have that opportunity. And actually, I love what you said about the not firing, muscles not firing. That's such a common thing that I didn't realize was a common thing until I started working with bodies, right? And so, you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it, right? And I remember the first time I saw this happen in person, it blew my fucking mind. There's this gentleman I'm practiced with named Mike, and he's got the most eloquent and elegant inversion practice I've ever seen. The man can float up like a feather, float back down, and just like do all it's so gorgeous and like he's one of those guys that when I'm teaching class, I will be distracted by what he's doing. I'm like teaching
Yeah.
something, I turn around and see Mike, I'm like, oh my God, what is that? You can do that with your body? Jesus Christ. And so one day, yeah, just phenomenal. I love it. And everybody's got their own practice and everybody's is beautiful, but some, just yeah, they draw me in, right? And I was working with Mike one day after class, and there's a couple teachers and Mike, and we were working on inversions, and he was actually guiding us through some stuff, how to engage the hands. And while we're watching him practice, notice that his upper glutes aren't firing at all. No glute firing, none of that shit. Like his low back, mid glute, like none of that was firing. But still, like he was so fluid in the way he was doing it. So it's like, okay, this is not happening. So let's fire these. Let's poke around. Let's get these muscles to fire. So we poked at him for a little while, got some stuff to fire. And then he pressed up again. My man almost flew himself through the wall because all of those muscles finally engaged. And coupled with all that strength he was already using to muscle himself up, it was insane how far this man flew just from getting that engagement. So I don't think people realize how much our body is not actually fully functioning for whatever reason. And then we
Sure.
counter that by just saying, "Oh, well my hamstrings are tight. I'm just going to stretch."
Yeah.
When it's not like,
Yeah.
well, maybe you should see about what your glutes are not doing to see if they can add some support so that your hamstring feels safe enough to finally release and be like, "Oh my God, I can breathe now." Instead of just holding on like, white knuckling it for the past 43 years like, "I'm not letting this femur go, god damn it."
Yeah, I that's a huge point that people, if people really understood like how little of them is being brought to the table, in their life, again, talking physiologically,
Mm,
muscularly, it would really shock some people. And uh, understanding like getting how to get those muscles working properly is a game changer.
yeah.
And when we doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, you can immediately float up into a handstand,
Right. Yeah.
but that you're bringing more of your body to the practice and to whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So what's your kind of approach for the removing pain? Is it more information layering in, like understanding of the way the muscles work? Biomechanics, I know, is a big thing that you're working through this year with yourself and with other teachers. So is it more of an informing kind of the more you know, the more we can start to work with?
I approach it with a few different prong approach. Are welcome to go into it as deep as they want. I'm always about, if you want to know, you have to empower yourself and teach yourself. So there's like the first step is just understanding some basic muscles in your body. So I'm always encouraging people to learn about what muscles do and then the major muscle groups. And so what I try to teach people is don't get into like trying to figure out all the muscles in your body. You just mentioned the glutes. So the glutes are a major muscle with people that in most people just are not working properly.
Right.
I'm kind of like always a little horrified and shocked at how many yoga teachers really have such little hip extension. Sure, they can go into a range of motion like dancer pose like nobody's business, but then you actually say, show me the force output of your glute. They don't have anything.
Right.
So getting those major muscles working is really important. One of the freebies that I have, which is the 7 days to becoming pain free, that they part of that series is getting the major muscles. So glutes is definitely at the top of the list. Transverse abdominis,
Mm.
oblique muscles, the psoas muscle, rectus femoris. So getting these major muscles working is really important. And so you work big to small. One of the big things that I have produced is my AYAMA series, my AYAMA training series. So it was really designed for twofold. It was designed for people who want to empower themselves to live pain free. And I don't want to say this is not a word to use, diagnose, but to assess.
Mm.
That's a better word. That's a good legal word that we can use.
Yeah.
Assess. They people can assess themselves rather than having to go to somebody who doesn't understand muscle function and is going to give them a bunch of gobbledygook.
Mm.
So once you start to understand how your body actually works, for example, when you fold forward and cannot touch your toes, not that you should be able to touch your toes, but let's just say that you can't get your hands past your thighs, um, that it's not because your hamstrings are tight per se, it's because your core muscles aren't contracting properly.
Mm.
And so as you start to understand that knowledge and are applying it into yourself, you start to understand, oh, this is actually how my body's supposed to work. And these are the tools that I can start using to get it to work better. And so that's what I'm about is also giving people the opportunity to go much deeper. And I find that there's a real hunger for people to start to learn how to there's a real hunger for people to understand how to take care of themselves, how to heal themselves rather than relying on other people to do it for them.
Yes, I think there's a big shift in that right now where the power is being put back into the people instead of, onto the
Yes.
person in the lab coat. And, for whatever reason, whether you've had a negative personal experience with the medical profession or you've ancillarily had a loved one, in the medical whatever,
Yeah.
it's so interesting that a lot of the people that come see me, the most the thing I want to make sure people leave and understand is that they are their own healers, right? You
Yes.
have everything within you. You might need some help every once in a while, right? But you don't need it, and there is a mix between Western and Eastern medicine. There's definitely a balance. My guts are hanging out. Take me to the surgeon, right? If I'm not feeling good about life, let's do some breath work and let's approach it in different ways before we, meld in these other things. But when you can put the confidence and the courage and the strength back into the person, they realize how strong they are as a person, right? How much knowledge you
Hmm.
do have, or the ways that you can find it. Listening to your body and listening to the messages that your body's constantly sending you. Like there is so much wisdom that the individual has. And actually, it's funny, I just read a book not too long ago called The End of Averages, and they're talking about how, since like the 1870s, at least in the United States, we've been going off an average scale. Like in the beginning, it was okay, let's take the average and let's try to be the average, because we want to be the average because the average is good. And then we bastardized that with Taylorism and said, okay, no, we want to be better than the average, or we want to identify who's below average, and so we can start grading people on this shit, right? But with, especially with something like yoga, our bodies are very unique. And the average might not really pan out, because if you take the average of 8.5 billion people, am I really going to fall within that average of body type, of body height, of body size, of hamstring flexibility?
No.
Fuck no, right? I mean, Jesus Christ, even our brain scans, all of our, we have an understanding of where the ideas of like emotions are here, and, pain is here and all this stuff. But if you take those individual brain scans that make up that 1,000 person or that 1,000 average, people don't match that, right? And so I think
No.
there's a bit of that that's happening too, or maybe we're finally reaching this renaissance of like individualism needs to come back. Yes, maybe you have a human body just like this human has a human body, but the way you've experienced humanity is different than that person. So approaching humanity and approaching your physical, your mental, your physiological health is going to be different than the way I approach it. There can be some
Yeah.
overlaps, but listening to you and listening to what your pain receptors are saying and what your body is telling you and what your mind is telling you, I think that's where we're getting at. And I love that kind of pushed more towards what makes Aaron happy and what makes Aaron healthy, not how do we make all of the people that kind of look like Aaron healthy.
Exactly. Very well said.
Right. Well, with biomechanics, I love that you're passionate about biomechanics too. Um, maybe we start by just talking about what functional biomechanics are. Like, what's an easy approach that people can understand what that term means?
Functional, well, the way I like to think about it is like, how do I function in life?
Hmm.
How do I move through life without pain? It could be as simple as just driving to the grocery store and going shopping, and grabbing your stuff and then being able to carry your groceries to the car. Uh, Things have become so easy that we just we pack everything into the shopping cart and then go to the car with it and then just push the shopping cart away for somebody else to hit it. Um, so but for me, like one of the things that actually happened to me one time, I was teaching a yoga retreat. It was actually, sorry, a yoga teacher training, and it was the second last day, and I was about to go on vacation, and so I had demonstrated Pavrita Bakasana, so twisting crow pose.
Hmm.
And so I come into it and I did it. And when I came out of it, I could feel something tweaking in my neck, like something was not happy.
Hmm.
And I kind of literally just shrugged it off, did a little stretch, and yeah, it was fine. So the next morning, I'm in the shower, lathering up my hair, and then reach up for the shampoo. And I kind of looked up and reached up at the same time, and my
Hmm.
whole neck, right? Like from around T8 all the way up my neck, seized and tightened
Ooh.
right up.
Ooh.
And so when I think about functional anatomy and biomechanics, it's like, how do I just be able to wash my hair and reach for the shampoo bottle without having that happen?
Hmm.
And so, just for people to understand the context, it's like, I was in a really stressed out state. And so three things shut muscles down, or three things, if you want to phrase it differently, three things have a negative impact on muscles: stress, trauma, and overuse. And so my system had a lot of stress in it. And then I, abused my body by doing that crow pose. And, it created an instability, or it just added to an instability. So when I reached up for that heavy shampoo bottle, my system was like, no, not doing this. And then went into a state of protection. So muscle tightness aka muscle spasms, cramping, all kind. We could go down the list. All of that is just the body just trying to protect itself. It just doesn't know what to do, so it just tightens up and goes into a protective state.
Right. And that's so interesting because, like, there's the vagus, the vagus nerve has the polyvagal theory wrapped up in the idea that if your vagus nerves feels like it's better for you to be in a depressive state, it can put you there because it's going to make you, it thinks it's the safest thing for you. So, like, say you're a child and your parents are abusing you, but you're going to stand up and you're not going to take it. You're like, is that all you got, kind of shit? The vagus nerve can look at that and be like, all right, child, love your confidence, love your ambition, but we're going to dial it down so you don't die. And then we're going to put you in a depressive state, keep you safe in that way until we feel that you're safe to go back to being your rebellious self. And then we'll put you back to full bore. But, it's that same kind of idea. Your body is fucking smart. Like, our bodies are really, really smart.
Yeah.
They're not given a lot of credit. We put a lot of credit in this brain, but we don't put a lot of credit in our bodies. But, the body has been talking to us, it talks to us constantly, right? Whether it's our gut health, our heart health, or our brain health, we're constantly getting these messages. So finding those ways to listen to what it says, right? We don't always, and it takes training because we're so taught to go away from that. But that's why I love, practices like yoga, like meditation, like those internal practices, because they give us that opportunity to listen again and to say, hey, we're going to do this together. This is a team. I'm not like, I remember one of the first yoga classes that I took. I remember the teacher talking about manipulating the breath. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that doesn't sound right to me. To me, it sounds more like it should be a relationship with the breath. Because if I'm manipulating the breath, that means I'm taking advantage of it. Like, I found a
Yeah.
way to make you do something you don't want to do. But when
Yeah.
reality, it's like, no, we're all in this together. Like, the breath is fueling me, and me fuels the breath. Reciprocation, right? And so it's that relationship. Everything's a relationship. How do you relate with your body? How you relate with your breath, your consciousness, your thoughts, your biomechanics. I mean, I think what you said about biomechanics is one of the best definitions. For the senior folks that I work with, the people that are plus 60 or have mobility issues in general, their biomechanics for success is, can you get up off the ground without using your hands?
Exactly.
Sounds easy. One of the hardest damn things you can do is you start to get north of, 40, 50 years old. Getting up without using your hands.
Absolutely. Or groaning.
I don't know if this is the biomechanics, but I found myself like talking to myself a lot, like, okay, here we go. Okay, here we
Yeah.
go. And I think that's like my own mental biomechanics. It's like, okay, no, we're gonna do this, Adam. It's like, yeah, we're
Yeah.
talking ourselves through it.
Yeah, and just to kind of come back to the seniors thing again, needing this again, I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy towards any seniors, so please don't send me any hate responses, but that shouldn't happen at a neurological level. That should not be happening. That we need to use sort of like this rollover technique and push ourselves up with our hands. Greg was working, my teacher Greg Roskoff from Muscle Activation Technique. He had this woman come to him who had this huge health issue and was prescribed by her physiotherapist to do all of these stretches. So Greg said, okay, I want you to do all your stretches, come on the floor, and let's see you get up. The poor thing, it took her 10 minutes to come up. And Greg has this all on film. This is one of his films. So then he went, okay, and he did all of this muscle activation stuff with her. So for your listeners to understand, muscle activation is basically reconnecting the muscle to the brain or to the central nervous system. So it's all happening at a neuromuscular level. Like, you're just improving that communication pathway. So it's not really doing like a quote unquote a bunch of exercises per se. It's just reestablishing this neuromuscular connection. So he did all of this muscle activation with her, got her to repeat, and then said, okay, I want you to go down, come back up. Went down, got up, no problem.
Wow.
Like just like that. It was, and to watch it happen was amazing. He said, okay, I want you to do 2 or 3 stretches that the physiotherapist told you that you should do. Came back, redid it, took a long time. Like she was right back to square
Wow.
one again. And so it's just kind of understanding, like when I said earlier that my goal is, getting people to have a pain-free year, that's part of it, is just taking this knowledge and starting to apply it into your life,
Hmm.
and that you can start to turn back the clock with yourself. And part of that is understanding the dynamics of stress, but it's also starting to build ourselves up at a neuromuscular level so that muscles are not being, sorry, that neuromuscular system is not being compromised, that we're actually starting to strengthen it. But it's just fascinating to watch people when they start to get strong. I had a guy in my class, just, I told you I was in Sedona at the
Hmm.
Sedona Yoga Festival. This guy, I'm going to say he was 58. I don't actually know how old he was, but I'll say he was 58. He was the archetypical stiff biff. And he said, "Yeah, I'm here because my wife got me here." And I went, "Okay, so let's see what happens." I maintain an open mind. And so he did the class. And at the end of class, he said, "I have been doing yoga." Like, when he says yoga, stretching yoga, like,
Right.
because I think I should be more flexible. "I've been doing this for 25 years. You're the first person to actually teach me something valuable and something about my body. And I feel more stable today than I ever have in any other class."
Wow.
And you could literally see him walking differently than when he came in. And so that's what happens when we start to connect ourselves. Like we were talking earlier about, so many of us are walking around with our glutes not active and our transverse abs not connected. So we're walking around with all of these muscles that are just not connected. Somebody said in Sedona, "I'm not playing with a full deck." and and when we get all of those muscles connecting, it's like, wow, like you feel, so much more alive in your body, feel that deep sense of connection.
Yeah.
But instead, we, as yoga teachers, are sitting at the front of the room, doing pigeon pose and, folding right over that bent knee, and, kissing the floor. Meanwhile, Stiff Biff is looking at us going, "Oh my God, is that what I'm supposed to do?
Right.
Well, I'm in pain right now. And okay, well, I'll just stay here and breathe and, feel shame because I can't do that."
And it's so interesting because like as much as when you're teaching a class, like we do our best to broad brush stroke the amount of people that we have in
Sure.
there, right? And if somebody's like gonna hurt themselves, I'll be right next to you and I'm gonna make sure that we do everything we can.
Yeah.
But that's why I encourage people to talk to us after class, because after class I can give you my time. I don't have to worry about 30, 40 other people. I got you and me, and that's
Sure.
it. But no matter how many times we tell people, like, everybody's going to be different. You don't
Yeah.
look at this shape and slam your body into this shape. Look at the
Yeah.
shape in your body and say, okay, now how can we work with this? But still, countless times I'll have people say, like, why can't I force my body into this shape? Why can't my body look like what you're doing?
Yeah.
No, it's not supposed to. You might not ever look like this, right? You might not ever be able to
Yeah.
have the internal rotation of your knees to sit in, reclined heroes pose, right?
Yeah.
That's fine. You don't need to. There's no flexibility award. Nobody's going to be out there like Bikram isn't going to come down from fucking his AC heaven in fucking the sky and give you some fucking weird ass award for being able to internally rotate your knees, right? That's not going to happen. So
Exactly.
I would love to see that visibly though. I would love to like I visually see that. That's kind of amusing to me. But like, so having that ability to talk to people and demystify that, like, your body is yours, right? Your
Yeah.
body is yours and it's going to be the way that you need it to be. And I can work with you on your body, but don't think that you've seen a picture of this body in this shape and now I'm going to eventually get my body there. Your anatomy might be working against you, right? You could have
Yeah.
long insertion points for your femurs, where mine are shorter. So my internal rotation, my external rotation is going to be a lot bigger, just from the
Yeah.
anatomy. No matter what stretching you do, if you have long posts on your femurs, that's what you got, unless you get a hip
Yeah.
replacement. So
Yeah.
I think it's really important, that work that you're doing, and to continue to educate all of our teaching friends, and that continued education for the people that have been doing it for a while. They're just getting into it. to, just make the time to be with the person, right? Let's work with the individuals, not the broad brush stroke.
Yeah, if I know that you probably have some yoga teachers listening to
Yeah.
this, and you know, there's two kind of well, there's a few different like things that I tell yoga teachers to do. So if you want to take something away and start like flipping the script on, people's perceptions of what they should do, a couple of tricks that I do: I never demonstrate.
Hmm.
I never lead class from the front of the class. Learn to talk your class through.
Yeah.
And so that gets students to start again. What is that word we used at the beginning? Concentrate.
Hmm.
That gets them to have to concentrate and make sure that your cueing is easy so that they can follow instructions, and that it's slow and it's repetitive and it's clear and concise.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. I think that we're doing a lot of damage to students at a psychological level, demonstrating, because so many yoga teachers who are demonstrating want to, right or wrong, good or bad, want to show the full expression of what they can do of the pose
Right.
to again set a bar. But that bar isn't the bar that we're trying to set. The bar that we're trying to set in yoga is to give people a deep feeling of becoming at home and at peace within themselves. That's the real bar. To become fully at rest, Sutra 1-3, to become fully at rest within ourselves. So that's one. Another tool that I use is just tell students, close your eyes a lot.
Hmm.
I'm constantly cueing people, just come into this. Now, of course, if they're doing like a pose that's balancing or something, it's kind of hard to do that. So you kind of have to, you can't just say close your eyes for the full class. But it does change the game, because by closing my eyes and cueing that a lot, people then start to move inward. And then if I do have to demonstrate, this is like my third one, I always try to look for stiff biff in my class, or, somebody, that doesn't have like, is not going to become like bendy Wendy and just kind of go into the pose,
Yeah.
because I want people to see what the real expectation is. The real expectation is to come into a pose to activate my muscles, but at a yogic level to become fully embodied in it. That's what I'm really going for. I'm
Yeah.
not going for like a certain shape. So, but I think out of all those three, I think the first one is the most important one. Like, just stop demonstrating
Yeah.
poses. And if you have to, pull stiff Biff out and get him to demonstrate, because that sets like a really good bar for, for people to look at what are we really working on trying to do here.
Right. And that's such a great point to make. Like, uh, I did a Vipassana meditation, 10-day silent
Mm-hmm.
meditation a number of years ago. And it's not till the end that they really tell you why you're silent. There's many reasons why you're silent. But one of the reasons that I loved that they tell you at the end is so you don't think you're doing it wrong. Right? If
Mm,
you sit in an 11-hour meditation next to somebody, and after that 11 hours of meditation, you get up and all you can think about is how bad your fucking knees hurt, your hips hurt, your back hurts. I'm just exhausted from sitting upright for 11 hours. But then you have somebody next to you be like, "Man, I saw God and I talked to Jesus and Mary and all these things happened and I saw my whatever." Right? They talk about their experience. You could feel like you're doing it wrong, but it's your individual experience, not their individual experience. And so that's
yeah.
that's that same kind of idea. Like, if you're not demonstrating, you're not showing. Because I demonstrate all the time, to your point. Like, I'll demonstrate, and while I'm demonstrating, I'll talk down the shape that I'm doing, right? So like you
Yeah.
said, like I'll go to the full dancer. Like I can, to where I can go with dancer. But at the same time, like I'll get there and then talk it down, but still be demoing to the extent that I can demo. But it's okay if you
Yes.
have a block here and you put your hand down,
Yeah.
or it's okay if you get a strap. But I'm not demoing that part. I'm just saying it's okay. So people are just like in their head looking at me saying, oh shit, I got to slam my body into that shape. That's
Yep.
not going to do it right now. That's probably some of the best advice I've heard in a long time.
Yeah. Well, I just reflect on my own experience as a student and how many times I would see yoga teachers say to me, well, say to the class, like, just go to your own limits and just find your edge. And their limit was like no limits.
Right.
They could just slam down. But something that you said earlier, we look at those people and think like that's, where we should go. But what most of us don't know, when I say most of us, like 99.9% of us don't know, is that that person that has exhibiting enormous flexibility has a really messed up body.
Hmm.
And they're probably going to have surgery. They probably, maybe they've had surgery. One of my dearest friends is a senior yoga teacher who's been doing yoga since she was, so young. And she's had now hip replacement, she's had knee replacement. She's got to go in for another groin surgery. But the way that her hip structure is in relationship to her acetabulum, she can come into like their like total external rotation.
Hmm.
And so that opens up this huge range of motion, and she's got longer limbs. So she's got like this whole range of motion. She can put her foot behind her head like nobody's business. She can do all of this stuff. And she's had surgeries.
Yeah.
And so we did, like, one of the things I always like to throw out there is that we don't know about is like 93% of gymnasts. So a lot of us compare, in the yoga world, compare ourselves to gymnasts. 93% of competitive gymnasts end up having to get surgery, like major surgery of some kind.
Right.
So just something to remember, like flexibility isn't what it should be about. We should be, again, what are we teaching as teachers? We're teaching people to completely embody themselves and to find the way home within themselves.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I actually just had a conversation this morning with a yogi. I taught a hatha practice this morning, and there's a gentleman that's been practicing with me for a number of years. He's probably 65. Very regular 3 4 time a day week practice. Just awesome guy. And I know he's been nursing a hamstring injury. So I talked to him. I'm like, hey, so how's the hamstring coming along? You doing all right? He's like, yeah, but now I'm finding that right side, the one that he tore, is a lot more flexible now that it's healed than the left side. It's like, yeah, compensation. You're gonna have to work with that. He's like, yeah, I'm working to tear the left one now, and I'm like, excuse me. He's like, yeah, so I can have them even, right? So if I tear the left one and give it some time to heal, then I'm like, I don't know what to do with you. You've been doing yoga longer than I've been alive. Like, what the, how do I, oh man. And it's like, okay, we're gonna have to flag this. I'm gonna have to come back because I don't even know where to begin right now. But please just be safe and just keep doing research because that's not the right approach to this. Please,
That is not the right approach to it at all.
man. But again, that's person that's been doing yoga for a number of years. Maybe that was an
Yeah,
idea of like some stuff back then, and that information just hasn't really made its way to be available to change in this person's mindset. And so it's like that's their solution for their next step for flexibility is damaging their body instead of okay, then well, how can I rehab my body? How can I recover my body? How can I
yeah,
biomechanically like fit my body into a space that feels responsible?
yeah.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's interesting. Like I have a gentleman who's coming to an upcoming training of mine, and I got on the phone with him. We were talking about his sort of hesitation, which was, I suffer from rotator cuff injuries, tears specifically. And I said, okay, well, tell me about your yoga practice. Well, I have a very strong kind of flowing practice. So I said, well, that means you probably do a lot of chaturangas. He goes, yeah, chaturangas don't really bother it. Hand smashing into my forehead. Like, what? What?
Right, right.
So, I mean, you're willing to keep doing chaturanga and get surgery? Like, why not just stop doing chaturanga? Oh no, but it's part of my practice. And this kind of comes back to this whole discussion about sometimes we have to say to ourselves, like, what don't I know?
Yeah. Yes, most definitely. Good Lord. And then please tell me what I don't know, like come on. Like
Yes.
once we can find those ways to ask those questions, it's like the ego finally steps aside for a moment to say, look, we're not as smart as we think we are. What are the questions
Yeah.
we're not asking? What are the answers we're not trying to find? And then being
Yeah.
okay with trying to get those answers and being okay with not finding the right answer right away. Because if you've thought this way for a while, then it's going to take a while to change that mindset. But giving yourself
Absolutely.
the wherewithal to know that whether you believe it or not, you're not always right. Right. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that kind of comes into it. It's like, well, I figured this out, so I'm just going to move forward with this information base. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so as we kind of like wrap up here, what's the like kind of the final parting thoughts you want to leave with our listeners for, living without pain, biomechanics, like listening to your body basically. Like what are those like those wise words of Yogi Aaron to leave with?
Well, let's see. I'll do my best. So one of the things that you've kind of brought up a few times, listening to your body, and I think that like, so I'm going to Japan, and I don't speak Japanese. I can listen to people speaking Japanese. I'm literally going there next month,
Awesome.
and yeah, I'm so excited. And especially after I've been watching the series on FX called Shogun.
I
It's
started
this
that the other
new.
day. I
Oh
love
my
it so
God.
far.
The first episode or two is kind of like, but by the third, fourth, I've been really getting into it.
Great.
And it's just amazing to me because I have so many thoughts about it now that I've lived a longer life. Anyways, all that aside, I can listen to somebody speaking Japanese, but I don't know what they're saying. And this is part of our job, isn't just to listen, it's also to understand the language of the body. What is the body actually saying? So, I listened to my body. My body said, your hamstrings are tight. So I stretched them. I didn't really understand what that was about. So the other takeaway I would just give to people is understanding that muscle tightness is a precursor to a lot of problems. And so pay attention to muscle tightness, know that there's a weakness somewhere. That's a whole discussion and where the weakness is and what it is.
Yeah.
Do my AYAMA training.
There you go.
But understanding that muscle tightness is a precursor, but if you've got pain going on, that's the check engine light of the body saying, there is something wrong. And so, if you have a car with the check engine light coming on and you disregard it, but then decide it's a good idea to drive across the Mojave Desert, that's you're going to probably have some problems. And so that's just the same thing with your body if we keep ignoring it. So when you say listen to your body, what I would just invite people to do is pay attention to when we have muscle tightness and when we have pain, and then ask the question, now what? And that's where people can contact me on Instagram and send me a message, and I'll be happy to help them out
There you go. And
or point them in a right direction.
exactly. And I gotta say this every time somebody offers that. When people put that offer out there, take people up on that. You don't really know. And if somebody with the knowledge that Yogi Aaron has puts that out there, like reach out to these people. They've got such a vast wealth of knowledge that can help you so much if we just ask the questions, right? So
Yeah,
I'll put all the contact info for Yogi Aaron as we always do in the show notes, but find the answers, find the people that can work with you, like we don't know everything, we can't know everything,
yeah,
but we can build a support group around us that can help us like so that when we have questions, we have people we can go to, and if they don't know the answer, they're honest enough to refer you to somebody else, and then that's how we start to continue to grow, we develop, we start to figure this shit out, man.
yeah.
Yeah, well,
Well said.
Aaron, thank you so much for being here. Love all that you do, and I can't wait to have you back on, brother.
Thank you so much, Adam. Great chatting with you.
All right, we'll see you soon. Thank you so much for spending time with Yogi Aaron and I. Check out the show notes for ways to get in touch with Yogi Aaron, whether it's through his Instagram or in Costa Rica at Blue Osa. Also, ways that you can support the show. Obeisance to love. We'll see you next time.